Hello everyone, and welcome to another Creative Design Team YouTube collaboration where we are challenging ourselves to only use cardstock on our projects. No pattern paper at all, so just cardstock. And I thought I would challenge myself just one little step more and use this die here. This is actually the Slimline Stitched Card Front and Background Set, thin cut. And it's in the current core catalogue and is still available at the time of me doing this recording. And I actually purchased this thin cut way back in August and I actually haven't used it at all. So I thought I would challenge myself a little bit further and use this thin cut, this die here, on my layout today. Now I'm doing a double page spread and I'm doing an 8.5 by 11 format. So I'll bring in what this looks like when you actually do the die cutting. It puts this stitched element on here which gives like a wood grain effect. So I've cut several of these. I've also cut some strips in Desert Rose. I'm using the light side. Sage, I'm using the light side of that as well. And Seabrook, I'm using the darker side, so the true tone of that. And I'm also using Rosemary as my base. So this is cut at 8.5 by 11. And then I've cut a white mat to go on top of that, just 1/4 inch smaller. So this white mat is 8.25 by 10.75 inches, and when put on top of the rosemary it gives you an 1/8 inch border all the way around, which I quite like. Now, so that I haven't wasted any of the paper because I want to use rosemary as my mats, I have gutted the middle out of this, so you can see I've just come in 3/4 inch all the way around. So this is my base page. I've already done my die cutting, and what I love about this Slimline card front set is not only do you get a panel that will fit on top of your Slimline set and leave a bit of a border, but you get this stitched frame, and that doesn't cut in the middle, so you just get the whole piece that will cover a Slimline card, which measures 3.5 by 8.5 inches. But I do like to stretch my die, so when I purchase something like this, I want to be able to use it on scrapbooking layouts as well. So let's just do a dry fit of what I'm going to put together. I am going to do some stamping, so it's cardstock only, this challenge. So there's my cardstock. I've got my 3 pieces that I'm going to layer up across my layout, and I think what I'll do is rotate these so that the pattern doesn't repeat the same all the way across. So this is going to be the left side of my layout. And I was looking at that and I was just going to leave it white on white, but this is where I started to play with some colour. So I am going to bring in some of the sage. I'm going to take this away for the moment. I've cut these at 3/4 inch strips, and it also measures 8.25 inches across. So that's going to fit on top of my white daisy piece. And I thought what I would do is just layer up some strips just to go along the base area here, and then bring in these sections. And you can see that adds just a nice pop of colour. But before I adhere everything down, I'm going to do some scoring. And you might be thinking, why am I going to score on an actual scrapbooking layout? But I'm not going to do any folding on this. I'm just going to use the scoring as a little bit of an extra feature, and I'm going to come in 1/4 inch from the edge of the white piece all the way around. Now I thought of this after I had already adhered this to my rosemary piece. Sometimes that's how it happens. So normally, if I just cut the white daisy piece, I could have come in 1/4 inch. But I've got to make an allowance for the fact that I've already adhered my white daisy down to my rosemary piece. I'm actually going to come in 3/8 inch. And I'm going to start on the white. I don't want this to go into the rosemary. And I'm going to score all the way down to the edge of the white. So sometimes when I'm creating pages, things evolve as I'm going along. I've already adhered something, but I know that when I did this process, I've already put together the right page. I did do it straight onto the white daisy before I adhered it to the rosemary piece. Now the reason why I've got it pushed up to the right instead of the left is because I'm right-handed, so it's a little bit tricky to score this way. So for me, it's easier to go onto the right edge so that I've got a purchase to hold on to here. So I'm coming in 3/8 of an inch. But just remember, if you want to recreate this layout at all, you would only come in 1/4 of an inch, and then you would adhere the white daisy to the background piece. I do love how adding just the score lines on this, and I'm pressing fairly firmly. I don't want to go all the way through my white daisy, of course, but I do want to get these lines visible. It might be a little bit subtle to see on camera, but in real life you can actually see these quite well. So I've gone all around the edges, and that creates another frame. So I'm hoping you can pick that up on the camera. And I love how this subtlety looks. Now, with these pieces that are going to go across, I'm also going to score them. So this is a 3/4 of an inch piece. So what I'm going to do is use the 6 inches as my middle point and line this up so that I'm going to put a score line right down the middle of this section. Now you can see I'm holding this quite firmly because I don't want it to slip too much. And that gives me a nice line right down the middle. So I'm going to repeat that process for the other remaining pieces, the Seabrook and the Desert Rose. Now, of course, when I adhere these pieces to this white mat here, the score line isn't going to be showing underneath those. So I'm going to add that in just a moment. I'm going to bring in my thin cut pieces. So I want to just sort of have this coming down a little bit. I don't want it straight across the middle. I'll move my scoreboard out of the way so that I can use my Versamat to line things up. And then this is going to be my photo holder here. So I'm just going to have a look at this and see what I think about the positioning. So I think I'm going to come down about 5 3/4 of an inch. So I can go ahead and I can adhere all these sections, and then I'll come back in and do some more scoring. Now I've got these strips adhered. I'm going to go down and run over the top of them and go backwards and forwards a couple of times so that they get the indentation from the score line as well, and they match up with the white layer underneath. You don't want to press too hard because you can tear your paper, but because this is doubled up, I just want to make sure that those lines are really shown. So I think you can see that provides a cohesive look with the framing that we've done with the scoring. I'll put this away. Now I'm going to arrange these. Now I don't want them all at the same height. I do want them a little bit different as they go across the page. So this side's going to be down a little bit, and I'm just eyeballing this. I'm not measuring it at all. I think that will work. Now with this photo mat, I did go ahead and I put 2 3x3s on here, and then I've put a couple of journaling strips, but I don't actually want this to be quite this big. So quite often when I've got pieces like this to do, I don't actually measure it. I just put them in and then I trim down the edges as I need to. I can see that I just need to leave a tiny little gap here so that the mats all look equal all the way around. And then this area here is going to be for an embellishment. Now I can look at this and bring these in even more if I wanted, so that my mat is extending beyond the white. So I'm just trying to work out what I like the look of best. If I like these to be pushed in, or if I want them out a little bit so that the photo mat has some of the white space on each side. And I think I like them all the way in. So after a bit of fussing around, I think this is the look that I'm going for. So I'm going to adhere all of this in place, and then I'll be back to do some stamping. So I've got everything adhered. I really love how the texture all comes out onto the white, and I love the white on white here. But now I'm going to do some stamping straight onto my page. So I'll show you the stamp sets I'm going to use as I'm going through them. I'm going to do my title with the Havana alphabet. Now I actually have a little bit of a confession. I haven't kept up with with my photos this year, like I did last year when I was doing the 365 days of weather with Julie Carrier. We were pretty much every month on point with this. I haven't even scrapbooked January. But what I'm going to do, I think, for this year is do an 8.5 by 11 album, and I'm starting at April. I haven't put together the January pages at all, but I thought, why not start with April? I have those pages then all nice and ready to go. So I'm just going to stamp my title across here, and I'm having trouble lining this up because my head's going to get in the way. So I'm going to turn it upside down, and hopefully you won't see my messy hair go everywhere. I'm just using black ink, and I'm leaving it on there for quite some time so that it absorbs into the paper. You can see the black ink stamps absolutely beautifully. And now I'm going to go along and do the rest of the letters. Now, this is quite a relaxed type font, so I don't have to have it all completely lined up at the bottom and the top. I can go up and down if I want to. Some letters are higher than others, and I don't want to stamp onto this piece here. And I think the trick with stamping is to not rush it, so that when you ink it up, now this is one of the letters, the I, which is quite a lot higher than the others. But when you ink it up well, and it's firm pressure, not too heavy, because you don't want the photopolymer to squish out a lot, especially if it's a very fine stamp. This one is quite solid, so it doesn't happen quite so much. But as long as you leave time for the ink to absorb, you're going to get a good image. And make sure that you don't have any of this little black here. I'm going to just wipe that off, especially when you're stamping direct onto your layout. Oh, I moved a little bit then. Hopefully that will work. I'm really happy with how that looks. I'm just going to clean off my blocks, and then I'm going to do some other layered stamping elements around these areas. For the next part of this layout, I'm going to do some stamp clusters or some stamp layering. I'm not using stickers at all, although I am going to go through my embellishments and see if I can find a camera to put on here. But because I haven't printed all of my photos yet, I might change my mind and put some floral elements here. I'm just going to leave that for now, but know that there is going to be an embellishment that will go on here. I've just picked this up as it was sitting on my table. It's just on a post-it note, but that gives you an idea that there is going to be something on here once I get all my photos on. This was just randomly sitting on my desk because I was using it to create some masks for another video in our membership group. So the stamp sets that I've chosen are this one here, Background Elements, which is in the Current Core catalogue. These stamps are invaluable when it comes to controlled splatters or doing borders. I've used this one here to do a border all the way from the edge of a big star. I'll actually put a link to that video in the description below. Make sure you click on see more for the description, because there's lots of useful information there with a list of everything that I've used on this layout, and also some links to some relevant videos that might help you. I'll also put a link to the 365 days that I did with Julie Carrier last year, and that shows all of 2022 all done. So you can see I'm starting a bit behind with April here, and I haven't even done January, February, March, but I plan on catching up, and I'm a little bit excited about putting them onto an 8.5 by 11 format. So the stamp that I've chosen for this one is this splatter one. I want to do some control splatters, and I'm also going to use Explore Your World. Now, this is an exclusive stamp set that for those of us who did Album Retreat, close to my heart, do a virtual album retreat where you get to make, I think it's about 11 double page spreads, and you get an exclusive stamp set that you can't purchase from our websites or anything like this. This comes in the box with everything already pre-cut and ready pretty much for you to assemble. So this was February's album retreat, which I have to confess I haven't put together yet, but that is on my list to do. And I love this stamp set, and I didn't want to just use it for my album retreat pages. I want to use it on my regular scrapbooking. So I've picked the little camera, this little dotted circle here. I'm going to use this open heart, and I've also got this little burst. So let's get into layering everything up. Now the first thing I'm going to do is my little splatter background elements on the areas that I want it to appear. Now because I have put this together, I am going to have to do some masking so that I don't get things everywhere. So I'm using rather a large post-it note, and this is going to do double duty because I'm going to do second generation stamping. Now the Seabrook doesn't show terribly much. You can see it's quite strong, or you can see it quite well when you use it onto a piece of paper, but I'm doing second generation just for a subtle look, and this is going to be the base of where my stamp clustering is going to go. But I'm also going to put it up here where I've got my April, because I want this title to have somewhere to sit as well. So I'm stamping off, turning this around and going off the edge of April. So I'm going to do another little bit of this down on this area. I want to make sure I don't get it onto here. So rather than using some ink splattering with some wet ink, you can get a controlled splattered look using this background elements stamp. Another one of my favorites was Perfectly Imperfect Patterns, and I didn't think I needed another like texture type stamp, but I do love this one, and it comes out quite a lot so that I can create this sort of controlled splatter onto my pages. And rather than trying to work out exactly where to put this before I put all these other layers down, just using a post-it note means that I get these exactly where I want them to appear. And you can see I'm rotating this every time I'm using it so that they don't all have the same orientation. So that's that part done. I'm going to bring in the camera, and while I'm doing this stamping, I'm going to do first, second and third generation stamping with this one image. So I'm only going to ink it up once, put my camera on, rotate it, and then stamp again. So it's a layered little camera. And while I'm doing all this stamping, I just want to mention, if you haven't already checked out Chelsea and Erin's videos, they've gone ahead of me on this collab. I will have a link to the playlist below so that you can click on that and check out their, I can't talk and stamp at the same time, so that you can click on that and check out their videos. And of course there are more videos that are going to follow. I'm only putting 2 of the cameras on here, and then I'm going to bring in the right page and see if I need to add any more. Close that up so that I don't get confused with anything. I'm coming in with Desert Rose, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing and the same treatments to each of these clusters. This one is the little swirl. I'm going in with first generation Desert Rose. Then I'm going to just mask off this area here. I'm going to put a little bit there, and then third generation up here. And that's very, very faint and subtle, but it is still there. So I'm going to mask this area off, bring in another post-it note, and do exactly the same thing for this little cluster as well. First, second, third. While I've got that all masked off, I'm going to come back in with Seabrook and do the little bursts. And this one I did in first generation because Seabrook is just a little bit lighter of an ink. And then I'm going to move these around. So it's just a process. Whatever you do to one, I do to the other. And I talked about this the other day in another video that I just aired where I did some layered stamping. I think I'm a little bit addicted to layered stamping at the moment. I do love how it looks. So I'm going to go over and then a little bit coming out of this corner here. And fold this up, and then I'm going to go in with Sage. Just clean off my stamp. And put this one back on. And then I'm going to get this little open heart here. I'm coming in with Sage ink, and for this one I'm going to do second generation. So there's going to be a little heart in each of these clusters. So I'm hoping that you can see all this layering of the stamping. Our 1 by 1 inch block is perfect for all these small little elements. I really love how this layered stamping is looking. But I'm going to bring in the right page so that you can see how it looks side by side. And this is why I only did 2 on the left page. I've already got my stamp title up here, but I've done 3 on the right page. And I think that is enough. I think maybe on each of my months I'm going to find a little camera so that I can put them on all of these pages. The other thing that I'm going to add to this is a little date stamp, and this is on this same album retreat set. There's a date element here, so I will be adding that in depending on what photos I'm going to put. I'm going to put one down here now just to show you how that looks. Just going to use my black ink. I haven't used this stamp set before, so I'm just seasoning it, just taking the residue off from the stamp so that it inks up quite well. And I'm going to do a test run with it to make sure that it inks perfectly fine. Now you can see if I push down too hard, these little fine lines do smoosh out. So this one really only needs a very light touch. So I hardly pressed it all for that one, and I quite like how that looks, and that's going to have the date of that photo in it, and then I will probably use that up in this corner as well. And I haven't done a mirror image on this double page. I've only used one of the slimline stitch card front and background pieces on this side. I've got the 3 layers on here, but I did want to use that element on the right side, and instead of the strips going across, I've got them in a vertical orientation. Now if I do end up with more photos than what I've got spots for here, I can always put a little 6x6 pocket page in here just to add a little interactive element like this, or I can add flip flaps as well. I think challenging myself to use a thin cut that I haven't used before has worked really well, and I'm so pleased that I purchased this. I've got some leftover strips of this from doing a bit of a play, so I think I might adapt this sketch into a card, and I'll probably share that on my Instagram account or my Facebook account if you want to check out what that looks like in a few days. As I said, this is part of the Creative Design Team's YouTube collaboration where we have challenged ourselves to use cardstock only on our layouts, no pattern paper whatsoever. And I'm really loving how this looks. I love these little stamp clusters. Just a tiny little stamp, just 4 little images, just creates the perfect little elements to sit on my layouts. So check out the playlist below so that you can click on that and go and watch Erin and Chelsea's videos, and then come back and watch the rest of the girls work their magic with just cardstock only. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy crafting, and bye for now.